Conferences, trade shows, webinars and virtual events are all great opportunities to get your brand in front of more people, but they often require a lot of bespoke content with limited repurposing potential. Am I right? Well, not necessarily. Keep listening to find out how you can squeeze more value out of what could mistakenly be viewed as single-use content. You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Content 10x podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, founder and CEO of Content 10x, and in this episode I'm going to be talking about the ways that you can repurpose all the content that you create for an in-person, virtual or hybrid event. By the end of this episode, you'll know how to maximize your return on investment for all of the time and energy that you put into creating those marketing materials for events. Also, the types of content worth creating and repurposing for events, and how to promote your events with more strategic content repurposing. Now, if your organisation exhibits, sponsors or speaks at an event, you'll know that there's a lot of work and content involved in the process. Here at Content 10x, we attend several industry events every year in various capacities and in different formats. Now, it might be me speaking on stage or doing a virtual presentation, or sometimes it's me and members of the Content 10x team sponsoring and exhibiting, so we'll have an awesome booth at the conference or expo for a few days. But depending on the event, that might mean creating a lot of bespoke content. Every event is different, so there will always be new content and marketing materials to create, both for us to use at the event and also for promoting our presence and our involvement at that event as well. If you work on the marketing side of things for your company, you'll know what it's like. There's lots of different types of content that need to be created for what is usually one very specific date or set of dates. It can feel like you're pushing all your time and energy into something that will be over in a flash, and then that content has no further use. Now, you probably already know that I'm not a huge fan of creating single-use content. I just don't think it's a good use of your time. And I do believe that any content that's worth creating can be maximised and repurposed. So let's talk about how you can really get the maximum value from all that supposedly hyper-specific content. Firstly, as I always say, repurposing begins at the planning phase. So if you're planning to exhibit or speak at an event, you're going to have a rough idea of what content is needed for it. So before you even think about creating content, think about the repurposing potential each piece could have. How could you reuse it? Now, I talk a lot about this on my recent episode, When is the best time to repurpose your content? So listen to that at content10x.com/232. And I mentioned in that episode that creating a one-time use piece of content, it's a bit like buying a really expensive item of clothing only to never wear it again. Now, this event might be a big chunk of your marketing budget for the year, so you 100% will need to make sure you can squeeze every drop of value out of all of your investment. By that, I mean wear that clothing again. Now, a good tip is to look at all the events or other opportunities that you have coming up and consider how you could create pieces of content that are reusable across the different events. In actual fact, when I'm considering whether Content 10x should even get involved in an event, the repurposing potential will play a big factor in my decision-making process. For example, when we exhibited at Digital City Festival in early 2022 in Manchester in the UK, it was an event we'd never been involved in before, and it was really still at the tail end of COVID restrictions, and it felt like it could go either way with regards to a big success or maybe a case of too much too soon. But we reviewed all of the content opportunities and the potential to repurpose and reuse the content again, and we worked out that even if we didn't get huge numbers in person at the event, it was going to be worth it just for the content. Now, some types of content are going to be really easy for you to just automatically reuse, which makes them really worthwhile creating. For example, a leaflet explaining your business and services. You can make this super evergreen and do a big print run so that you can distribute this content again and again. We completely updated our event leaflet at the beginning of this year and have taken it to 2 of our biggest events so far, with more to come. Now, staying with print materials, we also repurposed our case studies into print versions. Now, one thing to consider here is the audience. So if you're attending events in various sectors, you may want to make some strategic decisions about which case studies could be reused across the various events to suit each audience. I would 100% recommend that you have PDF and website versions of all of your case studies, as a lot of the events we've been attending also have virtual platforms where you can share digital versions of your content, like your leaflet and your case studies. So it's another brilliant way that you can automatically boost your ROI with some instant reusing, just by uploading your case studies and leaflets in a digital version to the app or platform. And as I mentioned before, just ensure this content is evergreen. Now, we made a mistake a few years ago with a whole bunch of leaflets that we created for Podfest in March, and we couldn't reuse them for Podcast Movement only 5 months later because it had outdated information on. We realised in hindsight how small tweaks would have definitely prevented this, so that was just a lesson learned for us. Hey, just a little break from this week's episode to let you know about becoming a Content 10x Insider. If you want more content repurposing tips and advice, then why not join hundreds of business owners, marketers and content creators who get them delivered straight to their inbox once a week by subscribing to the Content 10x newsletter. As well as tips and advice, you get industry updates, inspiring stories, exclusive content, offers and more. You can subscribe at content10x.com/newsletter, and there's a link in the show notes too. Okay, back to this week's episode. One other type of content I would suggest is really worthwhile creating for any event is a brilliantly designed graphic background. If this is for a virtual event, then this might be your Zoom background for a presentation, or perhaps a digital banner on the event's virtual platform. If it's in person, then I'm talking about your booth backdrop, which is of course a really important piece of content to draw people to your stand or booth. The cool thing about working with a team of graphic designers like we have at Content 10x is they can repurpose one graphic backdrop design into all kinds of different sizes for different formats. So if you spend time creating one core design, you can then repurpose it for all the different opportunities that will arise. It's one thing to use event content for other events, but there's also lots of potential to use these materials across other marketing. So try not to create all your content for one particular event and keep it in silo. Share it with your marketing and sales teams and empower them to repurpose it into other areas of your marketing. For example, you could repurpose any of your event content into promotional material for social media. This is where your single-use content can actually become very repurposable. Now let me give you an example. When we exhibited at Digital City Festival in March 2022, I was also doing a talk about content repurposing. Of course, I'm sure you're not surprised it was on content repurposing. And we wanted to have an eye-catching poster in our booth which told people who visited us when and where I was going to be speaking. Now this sounds very much like a one-time only piece of content, but we repurposed it onto social media, turning it into some graphics and text posts to give our online audience all the information they needed to catch my talk and promote the event. So it was 2 birds, 1 stone repurposing really. It meant maximising content that would otherwise have had one opportunity to shine, and it also helped us to share more awesome content about the event on social media. We also wrote lots of other posts promoting our appearance and my talks at Digital City Festival, and we've gone on to use those posts as a template for promotional social media posts in the future for future events. So even those one-time social media posts can come in handy again. And we also now have an awesome post-it template that we can repurpose for my future talks. One of the most enjoyable and creative event repurposing tasks we've worked on at Content 10x was repurposing my slides for a talk at Podcast Movement into a comic book. Yes, you heard right, a comic book. You should head to content10x.com/68 to learn all about that. Now, it was a little while ago, so you'll spot the old branding, but my slides that told a really fun story basically became a comic book. And then in the future, when I delivered that talk again with the same slides, all attendees got a copy of the accompanying comic book. It was really, really awesome, and it got lots of people talking as well. So that was a really, really fun event repurposing. Another big tip I want to share is to make sure that you agree to get your hands on as much content as possible with event organisers whilst you're negotiating the terms of your talk or your sponsorship. So ask if you will get copies of their event photographs of you speaking and of your team exhibiting. Ask if you can have a copy of the video if you're delivering a talk. I mean, we even asked if we could take down the backdrops created for our booths. They had all our branding all over them and are only going to get recycled. They're only useful to us. So why not see if we can use them elsewhere instead? And we've even been able to do that. So just speak to the organisers and agree up front what content you will be able to get hold of and use yourself. So I hope the number one thing that you take away from this episode is that content you create for an event doesn't have to be useful for that one event. It can help speed up the process for future events. It can be repurposed into other types of content such as social media content, and you can even share it internally to find new ways to boost your return on investment working with other colleagues in other teams. Maybe that leaflet is your sales team's missing piece of the puzzle. It's all about approaching content with a strategic and creative mindset and always keeping repurposing at the front of your mind. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a rating and review on the podcast app that you're listening on. And don't forget to follow the podcast as well for more repurposing tips and advice. As always, if you need help with repurposing your content, we offer a fully done-for-you content repurposing service for video and podcast content. So head on over to our website, content10x.com, to find out more. We even repurpose virtual events and talks. So if you've got video footage of your on-screen or on-stage appearances that you want to maximise, get in touch to learn how we can help. That's all for this episode. All that's left to say is thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the Content 10x podcast, then why not hit that subscribe button on your podcast listening app of choice so that you can get updated when new episodes are released. And I'd really, really appreciate it if you could leave a review as well. That really makes a difference for the podcast. Also, please do get a copy of my book, Content 10x, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results. It is the ultimate guide to repurposing every type of content, and it's available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback, and also in audiobook as well. And you can head to content10x.com/book to find all the other places that you can get a copy of my book. And if you would like us to do your content repurposing for you, then we offer a fully end-to-end done-for-you content repurposing service. This is for podcasters and video content creators. We have our Podcast 10x, Video 10x, and also our specific LinkedIn 10x service, helping you to become the leading authority in your industry on LinkedIn. You can find out so much more about our services on our website. And also, please do give me a follow on the social media platforms. I share lots and lots of tips and advice on social media about content repurposing. I'm at Content 10x on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and if you try content10x.com/LinkedIn, you'll find my LinkedIn profile over there as well. All that's left to say is thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.